Hi, I'm Zania J. Harrison, and I am the author of Fearfully and Wonderfully Made, I Am Who God Says I Am. I need you to know something. I need you to know how much purpose and potential God has placed on the inside of you. It's there, and it's busting at the seams, waiting to get out. The fact of the matter is that the devil works overtime, telling us lies about ourselves and lies about who we are and who we were created to be. He fills our minds with these different falsehoods in hopes that we'll never ever accomplish the things that God has intended that we accomplish. My goal with the message in my book is to be a light that illuminates the darkness that the devil tries to surround us with. You know, that darkness that tells us that we're not good enough, that will never amount to anything. All of those negative things that really just contaminate our lives and cause us to be oppressed and cause us not to even strive to be the great people that God intended for us to be, even before we were sparks in our mother's eyes. The title of my book was actually inspired by one of my favorite scriptures, Psalm 139:14, and it states, "I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well." Further on into the introduction of my book, where I'm kind of talking about the powerful scripture, Psalm 139:14, I reference Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. And I thought that it was very important to do so because in those verses, we see the foundation of who we are. We see why we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We see why we are exceptional and fantastic. And the reason why we are exceptional and fantastic is because we were created in the image of God. Those verses talk about the fact that God created us. He fashioned us after his own image. He said, "I want my daughter and I want my son to look like me." Ain't that something? Suffering in silence. You think you know based on what you see, but deep inside, my soul does weep. I struggle to embrace myself because daily I walk in a self-hatred filled hell. I distinctly remember being a little girl, probably about 9 or 10 years old, and I disliked myself so much. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't like the way my body was shaped. I was real skinny with knobby knees. And I remember that I convinced myself that my life was a bad dream and that I would go to sleep at night and I would wake up the next day and my life would really begin. And I wouldn't be Zania. I would be a baby again in my crib. I'd have a different name. You know, I didn't like my name because it started with the letter Z, and no kids had names that started with the letter Z when I was growing up, okay? I thought the letters T and L were like real cool letters. You know, if you had the name like Tanya or Tawana or Lisa, like you were cool. You had a real cool name. I wanted one of those kind of names. So I would wake up, I'd have a different name, I didn't look the same, and then my life would really begin. And I'd be good, I'd be acceptable, I'd be worthy. Can you imagine? What I should have been preoccupied about was, you know, running around and playing with my friends, eating good food, popcorn, candy, cookie, cakes, all that kind of stuff. I loved junk food when I was a kid, so notice I didn't ramble off anything about like real savory food. Those are the things that I really should have been thinking about as a kid. But I was oppressed with such negative thoughts about myself that I didn't even want to be me. It was sad. I had no idea that the way that I felt about myself had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with who I was or who I wasn't. It had nothing to do with what I could do or what I couldn't do. It had nothing to do with the fact that I had, knock knees and that I was skinny. It had nothing to do with that really. But at the root of it was that the enemy, the devil, had set his sights on me. He had targeted me, okay? And decided that he would fill my head with such lies about who I was so that I would not love myself, so that I would not feel like I was of any value to anyone. Nobody. But I didn't know that. That's why the message of knowing your worth and knowing your purpose and potential in God is so important to me. Because I want children and young adults and the elders, I want them to understand that the enemy comes in and he tries to make us suffer from this identity crisis. He doesn't want us to know anything about the truth of who we are. Because if we don't know that, then we'll never pursue the things that God has intended for us to pursue. If he can keep us bogged down with darkness and lies, we will never ever pursue the greatness that is ahead of us. We'll never ever understand the great potential that's inside of us. Never.